Pulp with Zach Francis, Tim Ferguson. I'm Brian Armstrong. I'm back after being gone this week. We don't have Ellen Burr again. She's got a visitor from out of town. We're going to be talking about SU women's basketball, SU lacrosse, talking about the NBA draft deadline that wasn't. But we're going to start.
Draft deadline? What?
Or
the trade deadline?
Trade deadline, sorry. And the trade deadline that wasn't because, well, we hyped it up to be something because the hypotheticals are fun and then none came to fruition. Tim, you're going to be covering the game tonight, so we'll jump right into it with SU men's basketball. What do you got?
Well, I think this is a really pivotal game today for both teams because I wrote about it a little bit in Scout last night that's up today, but it's kind of one of those bubble watch games, I think, for both Syracuse and Pittsburgh. If you look at current bracketology and things of that nature, again, Joe Lenardi, where those teams end up, sometimes they're not where he has them, but very often he picks close to 95 to 98% of the field. And right now he has Pittsburgh, I believe, as I think is a 9 seed playing UConn as an 8 seed. And then he has Syracuse as an outright 11 seed, not someone that has to go to Dayton and play a game first, going up against Providence, a 6 seed. So it's kind of interesting that the way they were paired was like these old, Big East matchups. But I think this is one of those elimination games, kind of like it was when Syracuse played Florida State about a week or so ago. The nice thing for Syracuse is it's here. And I think that gives them some advantage. The students, are now starting to come to the games again. It's a good atmosphere, and they always get up for that Pittsburgh rivalry. So,
talking on the game being here, their last game was not at home, and the first half looked good, but the second half was terrible for Louisville. Zach, what do you make of just that bad second half?
They weren't ready. I mean, it's just sort of as simple as that. They came out sort of on an emotional high, I guess, because of the win streak that they were on. And then what I really think changed everything in that game, it started when Syracuse was up like 18-6, and Louisville came back, tied it up, and then the shot right before halftime, I do not remember who took it for Louisville, but he throws up this hard fake from the 3. Michael Benajay goes flying by trying to block it, and he just drains it at the buzzer. And I said, okay, Syracuse is done.
You had the 5-game winning streak where it was they blew out Notre Dame without their best. Notre Dame didn't have their best player. They were played badly against Georgia Tech, but managed to get a win out of it. Virginia Tech had that amazing comeback. Florida State
overtime game too.
Yeah, Florida State and Boston College beat them both very convincingly. Is that more of Syracuse, where if things go correctly, they can get a win? Or is it more against Louisville that once they match up an opponent to their caliber or better than them, that they're just going to get run off the court?
I think the matchups are the biggest issue for Syracuse. I don't think it really matters like who's ranked or who they're playing, but the actual matchup and the way Louisville plays their game, where everything is so frenetic and they press a lot. And obviously we saw, the Anawaku last name is very, familiar to Syracuse fans. The fact that they could have sort of like their centers and 4 bring the ball out to the high post, make passes down low to other teammates. That versatility on offense, I think, is really difficult for Syracuse. And Brian, to your mentioning a second ago, having Notre Dame not having their best player, even when Syracuse was at Duke and Jefferson hasn't played for a really long time. So they need a lot of factors to sort of help them before the game starts. So I think that's kind of, to your point, that's what helps Syracuse.
I mean, it kind of comes back to them playing with such a short bench where they don't have anybody that can come in there if, Cooney's having a bad night or Roby's not plugged in. They don't have somebody that they can't throw Chinoso Iboko in there and say, you know what, you take over for Roby. He's having a bad night, because that Chino's not going to.
Yeah, they're kind of like an NBA team, I think, in the sense of some NBA teams, as good as they are, just don't match up well with other teams. And then on that night, it could be a struggle for them. You hear these things where, so-and-so hasn't won here in like 15 years. And you're like, how does that happen when they play each other once or twice a season? They just can't make.
It's like one time you can't pull out the W.
Exactly. And I think that's a Syracuse thing, is matching up. If they can't do it, then it spells, like Pittsburgh today. Syracuse is not a physical team. Louisville was a physical team, and that may hurt the matchup for Syracuse today, even though they're at home. So a lot of concerns on paper before the game starts.
You're listening to Orange Pulp with Zach Francis, Tim Ferguson. I'm Brian. We're talking Syracuse men's basketball. My question being, you have written down on the sheet Tyler Lydon, Enigma. What do you mean by that?
We don't know what Tyler Lydon we're getting from game to game. One thing I will say, he's always active rebounding. You know he's going to block shots. So that's a good key component that you know you're going to get. And as I've said before, too, he's a freshman, so how much pressure you can legitimately put on him. But at this point in time, like, one game he'll score 15, look great. The next game he'll get like 6. And I think, as you said, to your point, Zach, about having such a short bench, if they don't have players like him that they can count on consistently, it falls on Benajay and Cooney's shoulders time in and time out.
Can you count on Malachi Richardson consistently, because he had an awful shooting night against Louisville, and we saw how great he could shoot, and then how it fell off, and then it seemed like his shot was coming back?
I think that with him, he's such a good offensive player that I think you can count on him. It's just a matter of, I think at this point he's getting tired. He's not used to playing, this many games, this many minutes every game, and he's not used to having to play from down like they are. Because, these star athletes that come in from high school, they're used to blowing out every opponent that they play. They're used to, playing most of the game, but the games are shorter in high school.
Mm-hmm.
They're used to going out there, doing their stuff, coming back to the bench and saying, okay, that was fun. Let's go get the win tomorrow.
What has been Coleman's increased impact as the season's gone on, where,
Nothing.
has been the surgery? Has it been nothing? Has there been games where you started to see something?
There's been like 3 or 4 games this season where I'm like, you know what, day one, he might come on, and then it's like most of them I'm just take him off the court. He's a big body. He's going to foul everybody. Just come on. I know it's like the regional thing of you want to see him do well because he's from here.
From the area, yeah.
But I don't know. It's just, to me, he's a big body that can't really play. And I know that the knee issues, I know that that's adding up to his problems. But even before then, he wasn't playing to the level that he was hyped up to.
I just think there's no statistic that's going to jump out that's going to say he's performing better. The only thing I think with him is his activity. I remember times as seeing him as a high school player and even early in his college career where he was not even active. It was just like his body was simply out there. I feel like now you can see he really tries on defense. Is he going to block shots? No, he's probably not. He doesn't have the athleticism to do that. Are there some games where he gets only like 4 or 5 rebounds and you're like, how did that happen? Yeah. And then there's going to be games where he might score a little bit more, like 6 instead of 4. But the only thing I can say is just that when you have an inconsistent Tyler Lydon, when you have a short leash on Tyler Roberson, which sometimes I don't agree with, but that's how the coaching staff runs things, it does kind of fall on Coleman's shoulders to kind of play more minutes than he's ever played. I even look last game, he played 18 minutes. That's a lot of minutes for him. When Hopkins was there, he was playing over 20 minutes a game. So the fact that
early in the season he was playing like 5.
Exactly. He'd get that token start, and then he was out by the first media timeout of the second one, and that was the end of that.
He's like Isabella Slim for the women's team.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which, it just makes no sense to me.
Exactly.
So they have no starters.
Why is
You're
that,
right.
Is that what
That's what Coach Q says. They have no starters.
I said that tongue-in-cheek just for those listening at home, just to see if I could get a fun reaction from Zach.
Well, that may be true. We'll talk about that with the women. But
we will be talking about that going into tonight's game, this afternoon's game. What are you expecting from the Pittsburgh game? You said it was pivotal, depending on a lot for the tournament. Both teams should come in just over 500 in ACC play. What do you expect?
I think it's going to be a brawl. It's always a brawl, when Pittsburgh plays. Those guys,
so we're going to be throwing punches today.
Well,
nice.
you know what? I would love it to be like the old Big East where we really did throw punches, but I don't see that. I just think the team that wins the rebounding battle wins this game, and this could be one of those games where Syracuse gets out rebounded by 15 or 20 rebounds. And
wait, in Syracuse getting beat on the boards? That never happens.
Well, early in the year it happened all the time, and then it stopped happening for a little bit. They started evening things out, but then these are the kind of games where I don't know. And Jamie Dixon's always going to have his team ready. They're always a tough out in their conference tournament, in the NCAA tournament. So I see this as a brawl.
You know what I sort of think? Pittsburgh was the first ACC game of the season for Syracuse. They didn't play that bad in that game. They only lost by 10 or 11 or something at Pittsburgh.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's not an easy place to play. I think being back in the Carrier Dome, having the experience, having Boeheim back on the bench, I think that's going to go a long ways for Syracuse today.
Plus, the other thing is Pittsburgh, after that win, they've been going like win-loss, 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 and then they had like 3 losses in a row, and then they won one. So they've been such an up-and-down team where we know the Syracuse team has changed a lot since Jim Boeheim came back and the whole approach and the style of play. So maybe it's a completely different game, 2 different teams. You throw the history out, you throw the style of plays out, and maybe it's just a toss-up from the beginning.
Tim, I know you're covering the game, so I don't know if you want to give an official prediction, but if you do, here's the time.
I'm going to say, just based on the fact that it's a home game for Syracuse, I won't give you like a score, but I'm going to say Syracuse is not going to win by more than 4 points.
Zach?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really tight game. I think it's going to be back and forth a lot today. I'm going to go Syracuse by 7.
You literally took the score I was just going to say. I was going to say Syracuse by 7, and just to be different, I'll say Syracuse by 8 because, well, just for something. But yes, Syracuse by 7 was what I was.
But I think it's going to be one of those games that it's going to sort of come down to whoever kind of has the ball last,
and then it's going to be a foul battle at
Yeah.
the end, and we know how that game could get elongated. So up next, we're going to be talking SU women's basketball. Zach and I were covering the game. Tim was there as a fan on senior night, and coming up a little bit later, we're going to have national stories about the NBA trade deadline, Tim's takes, talking Rio, that, and a whole lot more here on Orange Pulp. Welcome back to Orange Pulp with Zach Francis, Tim Ferguson. I'm Brian. Zach, you and I were covering the game. Tim, as I mentioned before, you were at the game as a fan.
First game all year that I attended where I wasn't part of the media. It was crazy it took that long, but I'm glad it was the game that I went to.
Took until February, wow.
Yeah, it really did.
Not even for football or anything like that?
No, I never went to a football game I didn't cover.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to like 3 football games or something.
Yeah, I still haven't. I've gone to one basketball game that I wasn't covering as a media person so far, but I was doing it for class to do a play-by-play class, so make of that what you will. But it was senior night. You have all the interesting emotions, and they ran Florida State off the court for good chunks of that game.
I was really surprised by the performance because Florida State is a big team.
Very good big team.
A very good big team. Number 9/10, whatever you want. They're a top 10 team.
AP coaches poll rankings.
They're a top 10 team. And, I mean, Syracuse, they're a really good team too. But I think what really helped them is, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. They shoot a lot of threes.
Yes.
They
Yes,
shoot
they
a
do.
lot of threes. And they were falling. They
31 attempts against Florida State.
They were falling, especially in the first half. It cooled down a bit in the second half, but especially in the first half, they went on.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, that helped them to a 3-point halftime lead. And then in the second half, they just kind of pulled away. It was actually a really entertaining game to watch because I thought that coming in, Florida State was – I don't want to say that Florida State was going to run them off the floor, but I thought that Florida State would get up big early and then Syracuse was going to be playing from behind. I did not expect it to be the other way around. But, I mean, Brianna Butler, she started off hot on her senior night, hit 4 threes in the, first quarter and a half. And then Taylor Ford, another senior, she took over in the second half, knocked down 5 threes.
Mm-hmm. She had a couple in the first half. She went 2 of 2, and then she went, the stats off the top of my head, I believe she went 5 of 7 from 3 and 5 of 8 from the field. So all of her makes were from beyond the arc. Tim, what was your thought watching the first half of seeing, wow, shots are actually going in from deep as compared to, okay, it's up and long rebound?
Well, that's how they start. And if they start strong from the outside or anywhere around the arc, you know it's probably going to be a pretty good game for Syracuse. But I think what turns the tide and gives them an advantage is they can really press well and really wreak havoc for other teams. So as good as Florida State might have been up front, I thought their guard play was kind of weak because as soon as the variations of the presses came on, you were seeing them throw the ball out of bounds. Syracuse was getting steals. And so, it's funny because they rely so much on their volume shooting, and I know that it's been said by Coach Q that, the shots per possession and what types of shots we're taking per possession, but it's really their defense that is what spurs them on to playing well. So
that 83-73 win over Florida State improved them to 21-6 overall, 11-3 in the conference. Zach, we're just projecting a little bit forward. There's only a couple games left, both on the road.
They're at BC and finish off at Pittsburgh?
I believe so, yes.
Yep.
It's
reversed.
It's reversed.
BC,
It's reversed. And we're then in the ACC conference play, and then obviously the big dance.
Yeah.
Where do you see that going?
They're going to be like the 3 seed in the ACC, which I think could be a really good place for them because Notre Dame's going to be the 1 seed. They're probably going to win the tournament just because there's nobody really that matches up with the Fighting Irish. The Fighting Irish from South Bend, Indiana.
Florida State plays them next.
I'm going to be interested just to see how well they play because I think that Notre Dame's going to run them off the court just like they do everybody else that's not named UConn.
Right.
But I think the 3 seed is going to be a really good place for them. I think that if Syracuse can make it to the semifinals, if they can make it to the finals, I think that they secure a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament for the Orange.
Yeah, I think they just got to somehow move them up in the rankings a little bit more, because I don't know how relevant the rankings are for the women or not, because you have the gap between the top three teams and the rest of the way. But I think if they can keep creeping up and they start getting in that conversation where they're around 10 going into the tournament, that a 2 or 3 seed is warranted. But the thing with Syracuse, though, is I know they've been on this 7-game win streak, but they really seem to play very well at home. I don't know how well they play at neutral sites necessarily, where there's more on the line. So it'll be really interesting to see the performance during the ACC tournament and how that parlays into the NCAA tournament.
Well, Syracuse, they won an early season tournament out
They
in
did.
Las Vegas
Yeah.
or something. So, I mean, that gives them the experience on the neutral floor. And I think that, especially in the women's tournament, you're not expecting a whole lot of early round upsets or
Right.
anything because
More so now than before, but still not many at all.
Yeah. I mean, you're not. Yeah, sure. You're going to see your 12 seed beating your 5 just because that's the way to pick it.
Right.
But I mean, you're not going to see a 14 upset in a 3.
Probably not.
You rarely ever see that even in the guys' game, too. I mean,
Well, right. But
so-
I mean, it's like every couple of years you kind of expect it to happen, which I could definitely see it happening in the men's tournament this year.
this year, on a side tangent for that, this year it equals parity, so you're going to see upset city in all
I'm
likelihood.
expecting to see a 16 seed win this year.
Are they upsets anymore, though?
that's-
Sometimes I feel like they should just get rid of the seedings and just pair them up. Like we would know in our head which would be which, but some of these games, it's like, really?
And I kind of think you're a little crazy for thinking a 16 is going to be to 1.
It was kind of a joke.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Unless it's Albany. That's one team in the country you do not want to face in the first round if you're a number 1 seed. But they got to get through their tournament first, so.
And now that you got your interesting Albany news, for the games coming up, Pittsburgh lost to Syracuse 71-48, and then Syracuse beat Boston College 62-61, both of those games at home earlier in the season.
But one thing I do want to say, I was talking to Mike McAllister from Scout the other night after the Florida State game, and I said, you know what, if they are able to hit shots, if they get a good matchup, I could definitely see this being an Elite 8 team.
Well, it is, and Alexis Peterson's got to be one of the top guards in the league. I mean, maybe you're not, and in the country, you're not going to put her maybe with some of the UConn players or the Notre Dame players, but she's proven she can play. And Sykes is jumping all over the floor. She's like a video game out there. Sometimes the shots go in, sometimes they don't. They just have kind of that grouping of players that makes it really tough to scout, makes it really tough to put a game plan together. Who do we stop? Who do we focus on? And I think that gives them an edge over opponents.
Brittany Sykes had this really interesting play that she made the other night where Florida State misses a 3, and the rebound goes super long. It's like out past the arc at the top of the key. Brittany Sykes timed it perfectly. One bounce, she picked it up, takes it the length of the floor, lays it right in. And I mean, that's what made her a WNBA prospect before the knee injury.
Right.
Now, so I don't know, but she is still that really high energy player.
Talking about Sykes, she was honored during the senior night festivities, but she is a redshirt junior. Do you think she comes back?
I don't know.
Does that challenge the women's rule? Because like they're not supposed to leave early.
She has the option to come back.
I don't think she should leave. I mean, you want to really make sure that. I feel like that knee is in place and you have another solid season. I don't know how much the women calculate their draft stock like the men would, because do they have 2 rounds in the WNBA draft? I think so. It's very small. It's a much smaller draft. But so, yeah, I would come back if I was her. But maybe she has other plans. I don't know.
Anything you want to add on that?
I think that I had sort of thought about it, and I think that because she was honored on Thursday, I don't think she'll be back.
I was going to say that
it just seems weird that you'd be honored on senior night.
People have been honored twice before, but I know what you're saying is it kind of seals like the wrap that okay, it's going to be out on the door.
That makes more sense.
In post game, she was like, it was nice to play my last game on the floor.
Yeah.
Well, she specifically worded it to say it was great to play my last game with these guys. With these on my side, pointing to both seniors who will be leaving. She worded it completely, because when I listened back to it, she worded it as such that it left the door open, if not majorly just a crack.
I don't think I used anything from her, so... Nope, I did. She pointed out a stat to Taylor Ford, and...
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely used that, and I said something along the lines of, Brittany Sykes, while sitting at the podium, you saw a smile come across her face, and when somebody asked what it was, she said, "Oh, we turned him over 28 times." That led to the 80.
I tell you, they read those stat sheets, and you get Brianna Day in there, and she'll go through and tell you everybody's stats. It's funny because I don't know how much the guys even look at that. Of course, we don't get a chance to see them come out to the podium until the conference and NCAA tournaments. But the women pay attention to that stuff. I think goals must be set before the game. We got to do this, we got to do that, and they like to go back and look at those.
I don't think it's as much that. Also, if you're going to reference something, it's right in front of you, and it's there for a reason. So you don't say, "Oh, we did this," and then someone goes, "Oh, they're completely wrong." I think it's also kind of a guide as well that you kind of
maybe they should hand it out to the men before we go in the locker room, and they can just get a quick peek at it, so they know what they're saying.
Maybe the media should actually read it before they ask questions.
Yeah, that's true too.
Oh yes, there was. Okay, we're not going to dive down that one. Actually, I was going to. But up next, talking about the NBA trade deadline that wasn't. You're listening to Orange Pulp. This is Orange Pulp with Zach Francis, Tim Ferguson. I'm Brian Armstrong. Okay, so we all love the hypotheticals. We all love what happens in this case, what happens in this case. How can we see something happen, whether it's Kevin Love being traded, Dwight Howard. So when all the hypotheticals don't happen, we think it's a disappointing deadline. And this was... maybe not disappointing is the correct word, but boring.
It was inactive.
Inactive, yes. Boring, inactive, disappointing, whatever you want to use. It was uneventful. Tim?
So uneventful. I'm looking at my phone now as you're talking about it. I'm trying to actually act it out here that it was... I'm bored. I don't really... I mean, I care, but
Tim,
you're right.
You are... I would say probably the biggest NBA guy out of the three of us. All of us enjoy NBA, but I think Tim's the biggest out of it.
I think it's just because neither Brian or I really have an NBA team.
Yeah.
Right. So to know that someone actually has a team and follows it, and a team with 17 championships, by the way.
Third most in
pro sports. Yeah.
Oh, what, if anything, I know we're kind of just grasping at straws, what, if anything, stood out to you for just the deadline?
Well, a lot of things that were talked about was role player moves. And sometimes that's the best move you can make. And I kind of just remember quick back to when the Celtics did win their last title. Their biggest moves that year was like signing for Sam Cassell, who was thinking about maybe retiring during the season, I believe, and then picking up P.J. Brown, who also was coming out of retirement. So it was like some weird late signings and some buyout contracts and stuff like that. So in this year, you're looking at, okay, so the biggest moves were probably the Jeff Green Lance Stevenson swap. Green
Because
coming to the.
nobody wants Lance Stevenson anymore.
No one seems to want him, and I think that what they did with the Clippers too this year reminded me a lot of like a fantasy team or a, the old days. I remember I had friends with video games, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm playing a season with the Sonics, and I've got Michael Jordan, Dennis Rodman, and Shaq on my team." And I'm like, "What? You can't play a season and throw all these random guys on?" And that's kind of seems like what the Clippers did this year, And then they, of course, cut ties with Josh Smith, and he went back to the Rockets. But Jeff Green is actually a really talented player. I know he's bounced around.
I really like him.
Yeah, he's good on the Celtics. He was good on the Sonics early. He did some decent things with Memphis in their playoff run last year.
I believe it was the Thunder that drafted him, not the Sonics.
Oh yeah, that would be right because it was they had shifted and became the OKC Thunder. Okay, he's a good guy to bring in, and obviously he played under Doc Rivers for a couple years, so that may translate into something if we're really stretching there. People are trying to make a lot out of this Channing Frye situation where he comes from the Magic to Cleveland. Now they're going to move. Verazao ends up on Portland, and Brian, you said before the show that Portland's probably going to buy him out or release him, however that works. And then you have Kirk Heinrich going back to the Hawks. Because he only plays for the Bulls and the Hawks, really, other than I think he played. Who did he play for early in his career? He had one season where he played for the Wizards, I believe it was. Yep. So, it's nothing really that jumps out at you, I don't think, unless you guys saw something that was a little bit more exciting.
I don't know. A lot of people are trying to talk about this Tobias Harris deal.
Pistons getting better, right?
Yeah, Pistons are getting everybody. Like, they're just saying, bodies, come here.
Because who?
Sent, what was it? Brandon Jennings and somebody. I can't say his name. Evan Ivanic or Iliadis or. You know who I'm talking about?
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Brian has no clue.
None.
I cannot.
He's an Eastern European prospect. I'll have to look him up.
But in transition,
he was on the Bucks and then he went to the Pistons. I can't say his name.
So he ended up on the Magic.
Yeah, him and Jennings went to the Magic, which I think the Magic are getting better now because of that. Because I always like Brandon Jennings. He's a good volume scorer, decent point guard.
I've never been a huge Jennings guy. I mean, yes, he can put up some points on the board, but everything else, it's just...
Were you saying Ersan Ilyasova?
Yes, there you go. That's the one.
Jennings' path has been kind of interesting, too, when you think about that. Wasn't he the first guy that said, when they kind of changed the rule from 18 to 19, and he went over and played in Greece for a year?
I thought he went and played in
China.
Was it wherever he was, and he played, and then he came back... And was a rookie the following year, and certainly has a lot of talent.
But he was the first one that said screw college.
Yeah, but it hasn't translated after time. I feel like when he was with the Bucks, he had a really good run with the Bucks, and then he's had a hard time sort of sticking on teams, and
Which fun fact about Brandon Jennings, his rookie year, he led the league in scoring.
I was going to say, I remember a 55-point game, wasn't it?
Yeah, his career high is 55.
I could see that from him for sure.
I don't even feel right asking this question, but it's on the rundown, so here it comes. Quote, which teams are best suited to make a run outside of the top names? Tim, what's your answer to that?
We can have fun with that. I don't think that this is a year where you're just going to see the teams that are, I think, up at the top. Those are the ones that are going to advance. The Clevelands, the Golden State, San Antonio, maybe OKC. But if you were thinking of just like an outside team that could get to a conference final that you didn't expect.
I was going to say, if you're saying conference final, I was going to say, if you want to make an outside call, I could say Toronto as the 2 seed, but they're obviously going to, I shouldn't say obviously, but they're probably going to make the conference final on the other side, Cleveland. But. Right.
Yeah, but I think though too, if you get like a Celtics, Toronto conference semifinal, I think it's a little bit of a toss up because Toronto's good, but are they good? They've had early exits in playoff series like in recent years, whether it was to the Nets or to Washington or whomever it is. So they're
sort
playoff.
of tend to be a team that you can't really trust in the postseason.
But I'd say out of the East, they are the second best team in the standings, and I'd say that correlates with their talent as well.
Yeah, it could.
I like DeMar DeRozan. I like Kyle Lowry, but I don't know. It's just they're one of those teams that I can't ever really get behind.
And they put that Jurassic Park thing outside. Everyone gets so excited, which is cool because it's kind of like a college atmosphere. And then they just can't back it up, And the Leafs suck, and then everyone goes home, waiting for the Blue Jays to make their trip back up from Florida because it's so disappointing.
And then they've got the Argonauts to root for, don't they?
They do have the Argos, which is one of the top teams in the CFL. So, but yeah, I don't know who's a team. I mean, again, with Detroit making some of these moves, do they kind of work their way up? I think that seeing the slide in Chicago is what everyone's kind of interested about. You've got Noah out for quite a while. Some people thought Gasol was going to be on the move. Butler's out. I wouldn't say Derrick Rose has had a bad season. It's just been kind of a normal, nothing outstanding. So with Chicago kind of coming back to the pack, who else emerges? I guess
I'm gonna make a prediction here. Chicago misses the playoffs.
I think they make it at the back end, but I think they're one and done.
I think Chicago
but
misses the playoffs.
I can see the rationale behind it. I don't think it's like, whoa, crazy. But I think they make it just by the back end of the selection.
How about? Oh, that's. I was looking at division standings. I wanted the whole conference. I was going to say, how about the Knicks are number 5 right now? And then I looked. No, they're just last in the. But good news for the Knicks. Jimmer's on board for 10 days. Let's see what happens.
Oh, they signed him to
You
a
and your
10-day
you
contract.
and your Jimmerman crush.
I'm just saying he deserved the contract.
No
That's
one
all.
deserves anything.
You score, all those points
the
and
D League.
it doesn't. But still, though, but the thing is, though, where he probably could be gone after 10 days.
Yes.
Is I read that or heard that the Knicks already have 14 guys under contract. So him being the 15th guy, he's probably playing still on his D League deal, and then they can bring him back down as needed. So.
But if they sign him to a second 10-day contract, and then they say we want to keep you around, he's around for the rest of the season. So then.
That's true.
So then Tim has a fanboy moment that he can go
I do,
after.
but I hate the Knicks. It's so hard because I want to watch them, but then I gotta watch Knicks games on purpose, and I just don't feel comfortable with that. It feels a little dirty. So
Coming up next, SU lacrosse. Men and women, our lead expert on the topic, Ellen, is out of studio, but we'll have.
So there's no telling how this is going to go.
That is true. You're listening to Orange Pulp. You're listening to Orange Pulp with Zach Francis, Tim Ferguson. Ellen Burr is out, and this would be the topic that she would normally crush because this is her baby. And SU lacrosse. Zach.
you got 2 games tomorrow. You have 1 game tomorrow.
I have 2 games tomorrow.
You've been covering the
Do you
team
have the men's
as well.
game?
I have the men's game against the Albany Great Danes.
Yep.
And the women's game against Marist after they play
Wagner.
yes. Yep, that's hashtag analysis.
Yes, it was the games that we were previewing. So the men.
I will say, I saw the women's game last week against Binghamton.
I was going to say
Yeah,
Binghamton or
against
Loyola.
Binghamton. Yeah.
You were excited because some of the music they selected, weren't you?
I was. I was really entertained by it because it
So
was
what you're telling me right now, before you get in, is this segment's going to go off the rails.
Yeah, it probably will. They were playing a lot of WWE themes, which I thought was really strange. At one point, they played Daniel Bryan's
I was going to
music.
say, is there any Heartbreak Kid?
No.
Because I really wanted you to say it.
No. There was no. You think I'm cute. You know I'm sexy.
Is this 2 weeks in a row now?
I think it is.
I knew it was in last week, so I wanted to get it 2 in a row.
Wow, that really threw me off. They played Daniel Bryan's music at one point, and there was one guy trying to get a yes chant started.
I think that must have been. I can't think that was the women had anything to do with that. I think
No,
someone
they
must have
can't.
been having fun. And
I think they were. But it was like, I don't know, a lot of this, most of the backups were playing the second game. And, surprisingly, they played very, very well, won 9-6.
Mm-hmm.
And then beat Loyola 17-6.
Yeah.
That was the first game.
Yeah,
earlier in the day.
Yeah,
Yep.
the early game where Kayla Traynor dominated Loyola. Had like 25 of the things.
What, at the beginning, the face-offs?
Yeah, the face-offs.
She won 25
won
face-offs?
Like 25 face-offs,
Yep.
yeah. But, yeah, she's really, really good. I've heard Ellen talk about her a lot, and she's as good as advertised. But yeah, like I haven't seen the men's team. I can only assume that they're really good because they dominated their first game. But should be a fun afternoon for me tomorrow, watching a lot of lacrosse that I have never really watched a lot of before.
Well, you're going to get a good game in Albany, and I'm not just saying that as a homer. They are number 12 in the country. And Albany seems to, year in and year out, give a tough game to Syracuse at home. And it is Albany's first game of the season. They've only had a couple scrimmages so far. So you know they're going to come in being very excited. Scott Marr always has his teams ready. But again, Syracuse seems to always have Albany's number. And Albany's that team that performs very well throughout the season, wins the America East usually year in and year out, and then they just can't seem to get to the Final Four. You know, they'll get a decent seed, even win a couple games in the national tournament, and then they can't get there. So, you know, I think you'll probably still see a Syracuse win, but, you know, I would say instead of 18-5 like it was over another Capital District team in Siena, I think you're going to see more like maybe 10-8 or 12-11 or some crazy thing happens in the fourth quarter that, you know, somebody picks up a ground ball. Who knows? Maybe a long stick guy comes down, one of those defensemen that they can only cross. What is it? They can only cross midfield like really shortly. If they take a shot or a pass, they have to run back full speed, get on the other side of the line. So, who knows? Maybe a goalie will score.
And
Albany had that.
really
Albany
awesome.
had that last year against Cornell in the tournament. I don't know.
How is that even possible?
Because you can, again, just like the defenseman, you can go all the way down and shoot, but then you got to hightail it all the way back. So it's like you can't if you pass it to somebody, then you got to run back to the goal. So it's like a one and done kind of sprint thing. So
In transition to a different sport, a different topic.
Oh, thank goodness.
Just
I
to
enjoyed
wrap
this
up,
lacrosse
I like
a little bit.
lacrosse. I'm not good at the breakdown.
just wrapping up this segment of is it good, is it not, who knows, but maybe if it wasn't good, maybe because it wasn't good, it is good. The Ohio High School girls basketball game, 108-1.
Every year you hear about a game like this.
Usually on the girls' side, but
Yeah.
occasionally there's some guys' games that are a little weird too. I don't know. I mean, you know, as a former high school girls coach, both at the JV and varsity levels, this stuff happens sometimes. You know, I remember being in a JV tournament, so this is going back 2007, 2008. We played against a team in the first round that was very weak. And I would say we made sure that the blowout was on in the first half. And then by midway through the third quarter, I was putting in my bench players, and I was also telling because this wasn't my style as a coach, but I said we will run through the entire offensive play and get the shot at the end that we would normally look for. So I can't speak to this game. I don't think there's even any like parent video highlights or anything like that, at least that I've come across.
I'm not sure that there would be any highlights
Right.
for a 108-1 game.
Well, there's always that parent though that thinks that their child is going to play Division I, and they film the games in the
Yes.
corner and they send it into ESPN.
So true.
But the thing that I noticed too, and of course I wrote it here, but some states do things differently, and I don't know how it's done in North Carolina, Zach, but when I was coaching too, we played a team in Vermont, and they had kind of one of these deals where you can play 4 quarters in a night, whether you play like 1 or 2 quarters in your JV game, and then so it was interesting when the coach said, "Oh yeah, I had some JV players play some of the game too." I'm thinking, didn't you kind of know like before the game that you were playing against one? I mean, at this point in your season that you knew your opponent was so bad, you know, maybe you might have, like, if you could play JV kids, have them play all 3 quarters, and you know, I don't know how that would work, but what's the strategy here? That's the bizarre thing.
I don't know about you, Zach, but I think the most interesting thing that came out of that I did not know was Tim used to be a women's basketball coach.
Oh, I knew that.
I did not know this.
Yep.
And I feel like
that's why
I feel like I missed part of the life because there's just so many things I want to ask
Tim
about.
told me a story one time about how he's sitting at the end of the bench as an assistant coach.
This was actually with boys basketball though, but
Yeah,
you
boys
should still tell this
I
story.
knew
though.
the boys, but I didn't know the
Yeah.
girls.
And he says that he's complaining about a call, which he doesn't normally do. And referee comes running up to him like he's Joey Crawford, yelling at him to sit down. And Tim's like, "Yo, dude, It's okay.
Yeah, I was literally like the fourth assistant, and one of our kids was yelling about a call, and I might have disagreed with the call too, but I was like telling our player, please stop, like don't do this. And this ref thought I was going after, and he runs not only from, it wasn't like I was sitting at the end of the bench, so I was by the baseline. He runs from the opposite corner of half court and came all the way over. And the thing is, the same guy reffed me when I was a player.
He it when on a national televised game.
Yeah, and everybody in the gym got quiet, and I was like, he goes, you sit down. And I think he thought I was a player or something, like just wasn't playing but was dressed up or what have you. Totally bizarre. So, yeah, I've had some high school experiences that are interesting.
Oh, that literally just made that segment okay.
Well, there you go.
We'll be right back to talk about Tim's takes, Zach zeroing in, and the BA moment.
The B.
A moment.
Which I already have a feeling is going to be cut. You're listening to Orange Pulp. You're listening to Orange Pulp. Our final wrap-up of everything going on. We'll start with Tim's takes, who wants to preview Rio.
I don't really want to preview it because I don't even know if we're going to have an Olympics there, to be honest with you, with the amount of garbage that I've been reading about and
with
the bodies
amount of money it will happen.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to find a way.
I'm just going to start playing national anthems, and we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, play it.
Please.
Find John Williams's music and put it on while I'm doing this segment here. But I've been loosely following this because I do watch the Olympics. I don't watch it with bated breath, sitting there every day, all day, on all the different networks.
Who's going to win the 100-meter butterfly?
Yeah, or who's going to win the
probably Michael Phelps.
Or if you're in the Winter Olympics, who's going to win the biathlon where they cross country ski and then they start shooting at targets? Like it really, some of these sports I don't understand. But this thing with Brazil really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Number one, they already had the World Cup, a few years back, so there's some fishiness there. The last men's World Cup was in Brazil.
Yes, it was, and there's stadiums that are just sitting there empty now.
Right, and maybe they can use a few of those for soccer, but I don't know what some of those are even going to be used for going forward. So how a country ends up with the World Cup and the Olympics back-to-back, to me, is kind of fishy. And I know there's a lot of politics centered around this. And, of course, now extra things like, which I haven't really read up a lot about, but the Zika virus coming out of Brazil. And I know that Hope Solo said that, even though the U.S. women's team has qualified for the Olympics, big shocker there, but that she doesn't want to play because the stadiums are too close to the Amazon rainforest, which could bring in these mosquitoes.
And if you're thinking of starting a family on
right.
the Zika, it's not even just say the three of us go and at some point we want to start a family. We go down to Brazil or in South America, go get infected. 90% are asymptomatic. We come back, we get married, go to start up a family, pass it to our wives.
Right.
90% of them are asymptomatic, so we're dealing with a large percentage, and then the kid has the major birth defect.
Exactly.
So it is a legitimate concern.
And they said, even though with obviously the roles in procreation, but you've got men being just as much susceptible to carriers as they thought women could be. So there's a huge mess here. I know they spent a lot of money on garbage removal and some of these water sports situations. So, where they're having like the triathlon or they're having, like windsurfing and stuff and sailing and some of those things. I mean, this water is just disgusting with human, anatomy stuff in it and just really gross. And so, so you got that. And again, I look at who's picking these Olympics and where they're going. The next summer games are going to be in Tokyo. They haven't had it since the 60s, so I get it. Big Japanese city, that makes sense. The winter's going to go to South Korea, and then Beijing in 2022 is going to get the winter games when they just had the summer games in 2008. So as you said earlier, this will happen because of the money, and that's the bribes that are going on to get these particular cities. But
so the thing that gets me, America is like the richest country in the world. How can we not get the Olympics?
I think the politics and I think the terrorism threats, I think they worry about both of those. Not that they wouldn't happen anywhere else in the world, but I think that's what they seem to worry about here in the U.S. Like, what city could we pick? Like, I remember New York was trying to bid for the summer games a few years back.
Chicago,
and people were like, that's foolish. Don't do that because we were not too far removed from 9/11 at the time. But that's my question to you guys. What would be some viable cities to put either the winter or the summer games? I know I threw a few on the rundown, but where would you think would be good spots to host?
I think you can throw the World Cup into this as well. And,
agree.
And the reason for being saying it is Qatar is going to get it, or Qatar, or there's 50,000 different ways to pronounce it. They're going to get the World Cup in 2022.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
I thought that they had announced
Nope. It's still there, even with all the corruption. But the city where the final is going to be held doesn't even exist yet.
They're going to build a city.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I remember.
Sim City. They're going to
to.
build the city in time for the game.
So you have all these things. Now, there's plenty of places outside of America to hold it. Obviously, Canada did an amazing job with the Winter
They did do it.
Olympics.
And with the Women's World Cup, they did a decent job, too.
London, but the thing is London had it. Do you want to host the Olympics? There's a strong argument to be made that Greece having the Olympics started the bankrupt of their country. You throw so much money into it. You build stadiums that half the time end up not going. Yes, U.S. currently has the infrastructure to support the games, but you have London had to build some things, and they go, oh, it'll be increased tourism. You guys already have so much tourism. Where's your benefit going to come from it? It's almost, if I'm a country, I don't want the Olympics.
The only thing with the U.S., though, like if you were to have the Olympics, I don't think you'd have as much of the, like as you to your point earlier, stadiums just sitting there. They'd get used by colleges, they get used by youth organizations. So the lasting benefit of the Olympics in the United States is much greater than any place else. Why the IOC doesn't think, hey, maybe every 15 to 20 years we should put one, winter or summer, in the U.S. because we know it's not going to fail. Even though the Salt Lake Games in 2002 had some issues, but that's Mitt Romney. That's a
I would
thing.
still argue that the World Cup, if you hold it in the U.S. during that time, when it was last held in the U.S., when soccer was not a prevalent thing in this country, it still holds the most well-received of the World Cup. Think if you're Texas.
What year was that?
96?
94.
94.
Yeah.
Uh,
The women
where
were
was it held?
99.
All
around.
Yeah, it was.
I think that
Chicago, I think, was the base.
Chicago, you had New England, Dallas, pretty much where those MLS franchises ended
But
up
what you could
starting.
easily
They
do is
picked
you
those
could hold-
football stadiums, and they were there.
You could hold it in Texas. You have the big high school stadiums for your small matches that can hold several thousand people. You can have your mid-college teams holding for the middle. You can have your final in AT&T. That could set up very well.
But
for
if it comes to America too, we would. Your point is very valid.
We
but we
would-
would never pick one state. We'd always, mix it all around the whole
I'm just
country.
saying,
But
regardless of what it is, U.S. would blow the numbers out right now.
oh yeah,
I think if the U.S. was going to host the Olympics, now I'm only going to focus on the Summer Olympics. I think Los Angeles, Miami,
Miami would be interesting.
or like a Houston or a Dallas or something.
Yeah.
I think all three of those cities would make a lot of sense. I don't like the idea of New York because I'm sorry, where are you going to put it?
Yeah, there's no room.
And New York, the Super Bowl was not in New York, but it was
Right.
all the media stuff, and people in New York just didn't really care.
Yeah.
It was because it's New York. There's so much else. So.
And I
you
was
don't
really
get that.
disappointed when Boston was selected as a summer game site because I just thought the city's so hard to get around just because it's so tourism great, but you throw an Olympics in.
But Boston has all the tourism anyway because 90%, I shouldn't say 90% because I don't know the exact number, but so much was founded there of our country.
Right, and that would be cool from that aspect, but I think a Winter Games would be best for them, and I said this to Zach a few days ago. You could make it a New England Olympics, and you could have some events in New Hampshire and Maine and Rhode Island and still be the same distance from Boston, and it would really work better. There's less events in the Winter Games. You wouldn't have to build that many sites. It wouldn't be as expensive. I don't know. This is just a toss-up, this whole conversation about the Olympics.
I
How they
strangely
do
do enjoy the Olympics.
I think Chicago could actually be an interesting
It
place
would
for
be.
the Winter Olympics.
Yeah, I could see that too. I mean, they've got facilities.
Yeah.
You're listening to Orange Pulp. That was just Tim's takes. And now we're going to go to Zach zeroing in, who previews one of the best college basketball games we've seen all year.
Not previews.
Or
Reviews.
Reviews.
Well, almost a review preview because they turn around real quick and play each other in another
again,
week and a half.
Duke, Carolina. One of my 3 favorite games of the year.
The best rivalry in college basketball.
The best rivalry in college sports.
I could argue. Well,
It's the best rivalry in college sports. I don't want to hear an
Michigan,
argument
Ohio
because it is.
State.
No,
Football.
it's only football. I think Duke Carolina is the best rivalry because they take in all of the different sports.
go on, just like it's.
Well, I could see that too because when you try to do Michigan Ohio State basketball,
It
it still has a
work out.
feel, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have the same thing.
Same,
Whereas
yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
I can see
Duke
where
Carolina
I
like
can-
chess club match is probably a
if you're
big
talking
deal.
for one particular sport is what I thought you meant. I thought you meant this basketball is better than all other rivalries in any other
Oh,
sport.
I mean
Is
that too.
Yeah, okay.
I mean that
I'll,
too.
I'll disagree, but go ahead.
Yeah, that you're wrong. Duke Carolina, it didn't disappoint this year. And I mean, the thing is, Duke wins by a point, and they played with 5 guys basically. Matt Jones goes down early.
Yeah.
Which it just came out that he's expected to play today against Louisville.
Really, it didn't look good. I thought he was going to be out for longer.
I thought he would too. Said that he's not going to start, but he's going to play today. But I mean, basically, they played with 5 guys. Grayson Allen played out of his mind.
Didn't he look like Tyler Hansbrough to you though? Even though Hansbrough's on the other side, just barreling into people like he's a running back, throwing
No.
up shots. He didn't look like
didn't
that.
look like Tyler Hansbrough.
Maybe I just hate both teams, so that's why I say that.
Tyler Hansbrough is my least favorite college basketball athlete,
Mine too.
college basketball player / athlete
Ever.
But it was really surprising. It was like everybody going into the game, they were just picking Carolina because they're athletically they're better. They're a deeper team. The thing that really threw me off, though, as the game progressed, was that UNC didn't rely on Bryce Johnson like they did in the first half. A legitimate National Player of the Year candidate. And after the midway point of the second half, he had like 3 touches. And that just made no sense to me. And then the play that everybody's talking about, 18 seconds left, Carolina has the ball, Roy Williams doesn't call a timeout. He says, they should know my system well enough that they should be able to execute the correct play. And I'm sorry, Joel Berry, the second putting up the final shot, was not the play that Roy
No.
would have drawn up. He would have said, get the ball in Bryce Johnson's hands.
I love though how all the pundits during the week were really giving it to Roy Williams about this, or at least after the game, the days ensuing. Because I don't know what you do. I don't know if you. I mean, again, you want the ball in the right hands. Maybe Marcus Page, if he's this great college basketball player that everyone just loves, he should have come over and give me the ball, and then But Roy said in the post game, he was like, well, because everything's Coach Smith, rest his soul. That's how Coach Smith would have done it, and if given me the opportunity again tomorrow, I would have probably done the same thing, but I should have called the timeout. And everyone ripped him for that. He acknowledged a potential mistake, but then still stuck to his guns.
Yeah.
And everyone wanted a better answer. And I was like, what answer are you supposed to give?
I mean, like, I will say, I do not like the University of North Carolina. And I believe that's putting it
Did you go to NC State?
I might have.
Okay.
Let's go Wolfpack. But
One word, Wolfpack.
Yes, one word, Wolfpack. Screw you, Cuyahoga College.
Cayuga.
Whatever. I think that Roy Williams is one of the best coaches ever, and so I respect that he stuck to his guns. That he says that he would have, done the same thing again. But I'm looking forward to the March 5th matchup. I think it is for Duke Carolina 2. Always a good one. And then I saw some people from the University of North Carolina, the Tar Heels, saying that we'll take them on in Cameron. No, you're not.
Wow. This is a child who did at one point like Duke, and then he switched when he went to, which I'm glad he
Glad
did.
he
That
went to
shows a
Wolfpack.
lot about him as a person. He would know to leave something so dirty like that.
I
but-
will say, every once in a while, I will pull for the Blue Devils.
I'm right there with you.
Basically when they're playing North Carolina. Because I'm an ABCer. Anybody but Carolina.
Oh, is that a phrase from down there in that state?
It is.
I was going to say, I've heard the ABC, anybody but Clinton, but I've heard that one.
Anybody but Clinton.
Yeah, I've heard that
Really?
one. So that's why I was like, ABC, or really? We're going with that. I have heard that.
Poor Hillary.
That was Zach zeroing in with this guy. Hey, I'm just saying that's why I was a little confused. I'm not saying I support it, but I'm saying I have heard it. And now for the BA moment.
The
BA
moment. Before you start, you're the only one that has like a segment starter.
Well, I don't.
which is awesome.
I don't care for it, but
Well-
I just know you guys do it every single time, so I've just learned to accept
It's
it.
part
I
of our
think Brian
show.
really likes it.
I'd
Yeah, so
secretly he does.
Late at night, I'm like, I can't wait.
When
for
he
the
downs
moment.
when he downs a Mountain Dew, he's like the BA moment. It's you could make a commercial out of that. Everything that he does gets out of the shower. The BA moment.
I don't want to picture Brian.
I was gonna say.
Well, no, we're not picturing him in the shower. Just walking out. Then he eats his cereal. The BA moment.
I could definitely see like Brian becomes a professional wrestler, and then that's the start of it. Like
That's the start of the music. Yeah. Okay, Brian, it's your turn.
Well, now that that happened, so I've had a lot of spare time without going into description. I've basically been on my computer a lot because I haven't been able to do much else. So I've been running through, looking at sports stuff, information training, and I see the Peyton Manning thing and them ripping that. And as I'm scrolling through, a few stories down is the Cleveland wants to build a Jim Brown statue.
Good for them. I think that's smart.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Ready? Because this is why. People have come out of the woodwork and said, the women's group have come out and said, Peyton should be banned from Papa John's and should be just nationwide and everything else.
Don't build a Jim Brown statue.
And my question is, did they not have the internet? Because this has been out there before. And now, me personally, I believe the girl in this case. There's no reason to make it up. I'm not reporting it. I'm not facts. It's a radio show. That's why I'm thinking. And you have the PEDs, which, as I said a few days ago to you, Zach, it was whenever there's allegations and information to back it up, I will bet on the person having done it because more often than not, they end up coming out saying that they ended up using steroids. But when I see the two statues, my first thought when I see the Jim Brown statue is going, oh no, not right next to the Peyton Manning story, because then people are going to start freaking out going back years to see what he did. So if you want to play the Jim Brown Google game, a jury finds Brown not guilty of assault and battery against an 18-year-old woman. Brown is charged with assault to intent to commit murder, a model that he was with in a balcony of a second floor. A jury finds Brown not guilty of assault and battery stemming from a traffic incident. Is sentenced to 1 day in jail for beating and choking his golf partner, Frank Snow. Also receives a $500 fine and 2 years probation. Brown is charged with raping and assaulting a 33-year-old woman in his home. Judge later dismissed the charges based on inconsistent testimony. Following a domestic dispute with his wife, Jim Brown is arrested and charged with making terrorist threats towards his wife in the 911 tape. Monica Brown accuses Jim Brown of threatening to kill her, a claim she later recanted. A jury finds Brown guilty of vandalizing and smashing his wife's car with a shovel during the June incident. Brown is sentenced to 6 months in jail for refusing the court-ordered counseling, so all he had to do is go to counseling and he wouldn't have had it. And community service handed down, so he refused that, so he was put in jail for 6 months. He served almost 4 months in Ventura County Jail in 2002. And then files a lawsuit against EA for likeness and all those things. So you go, how far do we want to go back? If we're going to go criticize everything and we're going to make it of how it's going to go, how far are we going to go back? And if you are going to come out in an outrage of us not being able to remember anything more than 30 seconds ago, where are we going to go from this? So if we can bring everything up from the past and we just don't remember anything that happened more than 5 minutes ago, how do you release this at the same time if you're going to be able to see the same people who are critical by the same people writing the articles? If you're going to be critical of one, not being critical of the other, if everything that you've gone through the past is fair game. And I honestly think Peyton used HGH. I don't care. It doesn't bother me that athletes do it. It never has. It never will. But if we're going on that road, what happened in Tennessee, there's questions on that, statute of limitations, everything to that effect. So if we're going to go out,
deserves a statue as well.
As a bold strategy, but if we're going to go that, if you're going to go, you're fine with Jim Brown statue, you're fine with Peyton Manning statue. Keeping things consistent is the big question, and can we not remember anything that happened more than 5 minutes previously?
I think that what we need to look at is their performance on the field. I think that in certain circumstances, you need to look at their personal lives. But if they're being honored by a team, we're looking at their performance on the field.
And if that's the rule, I'm completely okay with that. I can separate the two. I just want to make sure that you don't get the people coming out of the woodwork. You see what I'm saying is, if you're
that's
upset,
the problem with our society today. People complain about everything.
Yes.
And so, I mean, like, at this point, what are you going to do? Are teams going to stop putting people in their, like, Ring of Fame or their Team Hall of Fame?
Oh, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if we're going to open everything up and you want to put them on this pedestal, let's make sure that if you go through anyone's history, you're going to find, in more cases than not, bad things. You're going to see bad scars.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what I'm saying is, if a team is honoring you, they're being honored
for what they do on the field.
what they did on the field. And so
Jim Brown did a ton on the field.
He's possibly the greatest football player of all time.
Yes.
Throw a statue up. I think that's great. It honors one of the best players of all time. If the Broncos or the Colts want to put a Peyton Manning statue up, hell, both teams put him up. He led both teams to a Super Bowl. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time.
Agreed, and I'm not arguing that case, but you get what I'm saying.
No, I get what you're saying.
It was interesting to read those two articles separated by not even a full screen.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I just think that that's what's wrong with our country.
And if
they
that's
complain about everything, and
if we want to go there, then just know what Pandora's box you're opening.
No, I know. Yeah.
That was the BA moment. This is Orange Pulp. For Zach Francis, Tim Ferguson, I'm Brian Armstrong. Tune in next week for another new issue of Orange Pulp.